And it was a fiery debate, to say the least, right? 6 candidates on the stage in Las Vegas. Newcomer Michael Bloomberg took the most heat. Listen.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats take a huge risk if we just substitute one arrogant billionaire for another.
All right, so the Nevada caucuses take place on Saturday. Did any of the Democratic candidates lay out their case well enough, their plans, right? Joining us this morning are political commentators Danielle Moodie-Mills and Pehme to break it all down for us. So good morning to both of you, and thank you for coming in. Let's begin with the newcomer on the stage, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg. First night out there. Obviously, he was going to be the main target. You heard from Elizabeth Warren right off the top. Did he come prepared?
No. It actually looked like he was in the midst of a high school debate. It was really problematic. Bloomberg knew that there were two things that were going to be coming after him, which was stop and frisk and the fact that he's trying to buy an election, and he didn't have a good answer for either.
It was a disastrous performance. Another area where he just had no good answer was about the NDAs that women in his company had been forced to sign over sexual harassment claims. It was not only was it a bad answer, it made his situation worse.
And those are two topics I want to get into. So first one being stop and frisk. Like you said, he knew he was going to be targeted on this specifically because it was a big issue leading up to today's debate. Let's play a clip and then we'll talk about it.
Let's get something straight. The reason the stop and frisk changed is because Barack Obama sent moderators to see what was going on. The policy was abhorrent, and it was, in fact, a violation of every right people have.
I've sat, I've apologized, I've asked for forgiveness, but the bottom line is that we stopped too many people. But the policy, we stopped too many people, and we've got to make sure that we do something about criminal justice in this country. There is no.
Prior to this answer, in the poll that came out the day before from the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg had grown from 9 to 18% of support within the African-American community. But those people in the rest of the country may not have been zero focused on stop and frisk like maybe here in New York were. Now they're introduced to it. What do you think their thoughts are based on his answers? Were they strong enough? And do you believe the apology?
Well, no, I don't believe the apology. But also, we have to understand that African-American voters are not a monolith. And they're also very pragmatic voters. So this right now is about who can beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a danger to our democracy. He's a danger to this country. African-Americans understand what it's like to live under an oppressive regime. And so very clearly, they're looking at, does he have the money? Does anyone have the money? Can they go toe-to-toe? Michael Bloomberg can spend $2 billion and still be worth $59 billion. I mean, that's it. That's incredible and also disgusting. So at the same time, I think that it's really important as people are getting to know him and understand that when he says that stop and frisk worked, oh, we just stopped too many people. There was a time when he stopped more black men than actually were living in New York at that time. It's problematic. And what's even worse is that he says that he's apologized for it, but he hasn't. He says things like, oh, well, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But the federal government had to be brought in. Barack Obama had to send monitors in. It was brought to court on many occasions. So there were many reports and accusations against how this was not working and how it was traumatizing men all across this city.
What's happening in the Bloomberg war room this morning? They should have known going into this that was going to be a topic, and he really stumbled through his answer.
I mean, you have to think that they did know that this answer was coming, and that's what is so mind-boggling, that he didn't have a stronger answer. I mean, those of us who covered the Bloomberg administration like you did, Dan, you know, we know that he bristles at questions. He doesn't like to review his record. He wants to look forward to what he wants to accomplish. And he thought that maybe with some quick apology, he could leave this in the past. And that's not how it flies in a presidential debate.
That's something I talked about yesterday on the air, was that when I covered Bloomberg's debates when he was running for mayor, it was well known that he is somebody who does not like to prepare for a debate. But this is a national scale. I want to talk about the big topic facing Bloomberg, which were the accusations of sexual harassment in the office. And Elizabeth Warren really took him to task on this one. So let's listen in here.
He has gotten some number of women, dozens, who knows, to sign non-disclosure agreements, both for sexual harassment and for gender discrimination in the workplace.
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told. And let me put, there's agreements between two parties that wanted to keep it quiet, and that's up to them.
I just want to be clear.
Elizabeth Warren really acting like a prosecutor here, saying release these women from the NDA so you can know the full story. Do you think there is something to be said here about this?
Yeah, and I think that his reaction to that, saying that some may not have liked the joke that I told, you shouldn't joke. Sexual harassment is a real thing in the workplace. We are living in the Me Too moment, and his response there was as if he is absolutely oblivious to the fact that men are being prosecuted for the idea that they think that it's okay to make jokes to offend women in the workplace, and it's not. He should absolutely release them from their NDAs.
And we also saw with the women who have asked to be released from the NDAs that they signed with Harvey Weinstein, that these NDAs are often signed under duress. And so the fact that he was so callous about describing these agreements as if these were just mutually agreed upon by two parties, as opposed to one with a lot of power and one with virtually no power, just really shows how tone deaf his response was.
On the issues, there was a lot of back and forth squabbling going on, but on the very specific issues, what stood out to you most? Was it healthcare? Was it climate change? When you walked away from that and you said, okay, somebody laid out their plan today, what was that one thing that stuck out to you?
Interestingly enough, I think that Elizabeth Warren's conversation around environmental justice really stood out to me. While everybody else is having a conversation about climate change and how it's affecting the world globally, she's having a conversation about how it has affected Black and brown people that are living in inner cities that have been disproportionately advantaged by climate change, and bringing that to the table. We always want to talk about other countries. We want to talk about melting glaciers. We don't want to talk about the people. And I like the fact that she brought it back to the people.
I thought Elizabeth Warren just had a spectacular performance last night across the board. And I think what really, in a lot of ways we've heard through these series of debates where the candidates come down on these positions, but it's their ability to articulate it to the general public. And Elizabeth Warren was so crisp with her arguments last night, and she made them in a way that were accessible and compelling.
And do you think that, looking forward to Tuesday's debate, I know you both think that Elizabeth Warren won last night. What does Bloomberg have to do now to actually get to turn this around?
He really needs to prepare. He really needs to have a better answer for
Do you
stop
think this will hurt his poll numbers?
I mean, he's buying his poll numbers, so I don't think that. I think he's just going to flood the airwaves with more ads and the radios with more ads.
I think Danielle's definitely right. He is going to double down with his expenditures in light of this humiliating performance. And so I'm not even sure to what degree the debate is going to affect his polling numbers, but he can spend his way out of the hole. At least that's what he's thinking.
Guys, we could talk about this all morning long. There was a lot to talk about. Thank you both for coming in, Danielle and more.